me to present here at the convention, and he said, do anything you want. And I said, well, I think everything is going to be covered. You know, the things that I've done in the chapter, there's not going to be anything that's going to be left. And I thought about it, and I said, there's one thing that I would like to do, and that's do a presentation on the nursery and on Bobby Dupont's contribution to the Hibiscus Society. And so that's what I agreed on, and that was the reason I was willing to do it. And so I'm doing this, and as I prepared it, I have to say I walked down memory lane. Some of it very emotional, because this is really family, and the sense of loss, the sense of remembering has been very intense doing this, but a good experience. And I think it's one that we should acknowledge, particularly here in Louisiana, that has been very important to the life of our Hibiscus societies. First of all, we all came together because of flowers. We all saw beautiful flowers, and eventually we came together as a group. We started little clubs here in New Orleans. I started with 4 secretaries at Loyola University, and we began meeting, and within probably 3 or 4 meetings, Wally and Sandra show up at the door and said, we heard you're meeting about flowers. And we started as a club, and then we moved to eventually joining the American Hibiscus Society. We did that as a club before we even knew there was an American Hibiscus Society. And almost from the beginning, we're going to become involved with flowers, but really with friendships. Developing very intense friendships over the years. I thought we should look at some of the other important people also that have contributed to the hibiscus world. I think of Barry Schluter, for example, who's done a tremendous amount of hybridizing, was known and used to produce those most wonderful newsletters that everyone joined the club just so they could get his newsletter. He did a great deal of hybridizing. He started in roses, he moved to hibiscus. Most of us know his plants if we didn't know him personally. He started with some of the most iconic flowers, Doubledate, Atlantis, Climax, all of those thousands really that he hybridized over time. So he was a model that I looked at. Then of course Don Flores. This is Don Flores before he got sick and lost his extra set of arms. And this is Don Flores today. Don has also been a great contributor to hibiscus in the Texas area and Louisiana area. The most generous man will share anything with you. And that was his contribution, and still his contribution today. Then I thought of Hidden Valley Hibiscus. For a long time we were getting plants from Hidden Valley Hibiscus. A lot of new cultivars. He says on his website that he produced over 2,000 cultivars before he retired in 2023. So we're losing people in a sense, but their contributions are still living on. And it's hybridizing again. Then we have other sets of hybridizers. We have Win Soldani in Florida. Win always said, I sell cultivars, I don't sell plants. And truer words were never spoken. He wasn't interested in growing out plants. On the other hand, Matt Martindale always grew the most extraordinarily beautiful plants. Again, a hybridizer as well as a grower. So we have models that are out there, and models that we really need to acknowledge. Some of our models did not produce great, but they were important for the life of the Hibiscus Society here. Rod Hendrick shared wood and expertise very early on with me personally, and was very instrumental in founding the Baton Rouge Club. Wally Barr, who was the first vice president of the New Orleans Club before it became a chapter, made the mistake of going to the bathroom, and we elected him while he was out of the room. And he remained vice president from then on. Wally always described himself, I'm the heavy lifter. Sandra with the flower, I'm the heavy lifter. But he made that contribution, and he worked tirelessly for years. So many people have made contributions. So I asked myself, well, how do I describe Bobby Dupont? He was a terrible grafter. He gave that up after he cut himself a couple of times. And, no, you do that. Which always shocked me, because as a florist, he constantly was using a knife. But he didn't want to get into grafting. Then, as a hybridizer, we'll see that he's made some real contributions, but generally speaking, Bobby didn't get into hybridizing that much. He started hybridizing, as I have a slide will tell you, in 97, more or less, 1997, and then he subsequently, probably within 3 or 4 years, he gave that up altogether and left that all to me. So he's not a hybridizer, exactly. He's certainly not a grafter, but what is he? And I spent time thinking about it as I prepared this presentation, and it came to me. I said, he's an enabler. He enabled us to do things we would never have accomplished without him. And he was a spirit of cooperation and generosity that pulled these clubs in Louisiana together. And as we'll see, also made a mark by getting the nursery involved in Hibiscus. As I mentioned, for me, this is personal. I knew the Dupont family now for over 30 years. I tried to figure out exactly when I met Bobby. Actually, I met Bobby probably somewhere around 1985. I had friends living in Plaquemine. One of the Jesuits there had his mother and sister living there and invited me a couple of times to visit. Then I became a regular visitor there, and I helped her with her garden every year. And we would go down to Dupont, the garden center in town next to the floral shop where Bobby was running it at the time, and we would buy plants. And I shook his hand, never dreaming that this would develop into really a very personal relationship that was, I wanted to say, almost like second parents to me. And they certainly treated me that way over the years. This again, this is Bobby and Bootsy at one of our receptions. This is in 2016, the year before Bobby passed away. And they came to everything, they shared everything. They became like parents in a family that everyone gathers around. They gather around because they recognize a special relationship, a special love, a special affection, a special intensity. And this, for the clubs here in Louisiana, is really descriptive of this couple. Through them, we get to know Robbie and his wife Susan, and I'll be talking about them in a minute. But this was a friendship of many, many years. Bobby himself was born in 1928, as you can see. He always talked about two things, or well, one he talked about and one he didn't talk about. But two things really molded his adult existence, three actually. The first was this military experience in Europe. He was in Germany, he made deep friends there, and for the next umpteen years, if you mentioned the word Germany, he was off and running with his stories. 3 or 4 times you might have heard them, but he was off and running. That was a very freeing experience for him, being there in the military, making friends, and traveling very often back to Germany. The second thing was marrying Bootsy. When he started the garden center, when he started the nursery, when he started the floral shop in 1953, he told me later, Bootsy was the only one who supported him. Everyone else in the family was against it. They thought it was a bad idea. She was his supporter, and she remained that for the rest of their lives. The third thing was the death of Malcolm, their son, in 1977 in an accident. That also formed Bobby, but he didn't like to talk about that much. Occasionally he would say things that let me know that experience, that empathy for what he experienced, gave him an empathy for people that was really extraordinary. Now, in 1953, he's going to open his floral shop. It starts in a different location and eventually moves right next to where they have a house built. And later he's going to also play a role, of course, in Dupont Nursery. And he was for years involved in the nursery trade, as well as being a member of the Iberville Parish School Board for many, many years. The love of his later life is going to be hibiscus, without a doubt. He loved all things flowers. He loved all things beautiful, but hibiscus became his great joy. Now, as they did everything together, this was a couple. Bootsy gets drawn into this because she's a helpmate. And together, you sort of had a match set. It was Bobby and Bootsy, Bootsy and Bobby. You couldn't really think of them as separate. And one of the reasons for that is that extension of that family warmth, that family welcoming that they give to everyone. They had 5 sons. Malcolm, as I mentioned, passed away in 1977 in an accident. Their adult sons, Danny, who's here, Robbie, who's running the nursery right now, Ricky, and Michael. So family and thinking of things in terms of family were very important to them, and the success of the family. His greatest desire was to see his children succeed. That's what he really wanted. Now, we think of the great success, it's Dupont Nursery, particularly for the flowers. We think of Dupont Nursery here for Louisiana, for all that it's done, for the fact that it's really become a premier location for hibiscus. We think of flowers, we think of the production, we think of the extension. We see here on one of their delivery trucks, Cajun hibiscus. They had these trucks decorated with these banners on them so that people realize this becomes a central point for the university production. It is a massive production. They have all kinds of plants. And from being a very fringe part of their business, hibiscus has become more important over time. And that is due to Bobby. They produce about 50,000 hibiscus a year. So it's a substantial production, a substantial market. Initially, and I didn't realize this, initially they produced everything in 10-inch pots. I think of the gallons now, but I was told, and when I saw this, I asked about it, they said, oh yeah, initially we just did the 10-inch pots. We didn't do the gallons. That came later as the demands build. And this, as they build, of course, the hibiscus, they also build this nursery. It's huge. And if you have to walk it up and down, you realize how huge it has become. Now, it's not a nursery that, I will say, and they will be quick, Robbie will admit it, it's not a nursery that was planned. It grew organically. As they added on, as they didn't have a master plan when they started, it caused problems later on. But the nursery grew as demand grows, as the family got expertise and became more involved in that nursery trade in Louisiana. This is just a map to show this is their main customers that they deliver, but they periodically deliver to Florida, Texas. They ship plants. At one time they were shipping plants out to Russia, hibiscus. So some varieties on websites in Russia would appear with Dupont hibiscus because they had shipped them there. Now, this is the office, and as you can see, the plaques that they have garnered over time lets you see that, this mentality at the nursery has really turned to hibiscus. they've got all of these plaques, all of these things, all of these hibiscus now circulating through the office. So, yes, hibiscus is very important, but that wasn't always the case. I found this slide and I said, it says it all. This is actually from an open house. Somebody came in, they got one plant in the back. I took that picture and I said, you know, that says everything about what happened at the nursery. The hibiscus sort of snuck their way in little by little. And what now seems like such a huge production, such a huge market, so many varieties, started out very modestly. And it started out really because of the relationship between Bobby and myself and the fact that Bobby is stubborn. The frame here, I took the other day, couldn't find a picture of the earlier period, but this is behind his house, behind the floral shop. And they developed there a garden center. But before the garden center actually started, he had a greenhouse and he raised flowers for his nursery trade. That's before you brought everything in by air from all over, and you had perfect flowers from Colombia or from somewhere in Africa or wherever they were coming from. That trade initially in the 50s wasn't there. You didn't have that kind of market connection. And so you raised a number of your flowers so that you could use them in your floral business. That's what this started as. Eventually, it's going to morph and change, but that's important as well when we think of it. That's where it really starts. It really starts downtown, not at the bayou. This is in the picture, I got a contemporary one. I couldn't find an old one, and the family is remarkably unsentimental. They all looked around for pictures and no one could find anything that I wanted, so I had to go and improvise. Now, part of that is something I've noticed. The quality of our iPhones has changed reality. In those days, in the 80s and even into the 90s, people didn't have use of iPhone to the same degree, and at the same time, the quality was not there. Today, we have wonderful quality in the iPhone, so you can get some of these pictures. But they weren't so common back then, and as a result, it's sparse at times. But this is where you have, on one side, you have the nursery, the floral shop, and the house is behind it. And then on the other side of that, you have what will develop as a garden center. That garden center started in 1975 because Robbie, wanting to get married and needing something, decided, Daddy, let's turn this into a business. And he and his wife for 10 years basically ran a garden center on the other side of the nursery. Then in '85, Robbie decided that he really wanted to go into wholesale. He didn't particularly care for resale. And retail is more difficult. Bobby took over running, with some help, running the garden center downtown, and they pooled resources and they will build out on the bayou. So we move again, family operation. Now, it was difficult. The planning of the engineering part of it, that fell mainly to Danny. Danny does the greenhouses. But as I said, they didn't expect to grow as they did. They didn't plan to grow as they did. But they ended up doing it. But it turned out not to be as easy as Robbie had thought. It's not an easy start. The water had salt intrusion, causes a problem. It was colder by a few degrees down at the bayou than it was in town. There were problems scaling up. Work were a problem. So there were struggles, particularly in those first few years before they learned, through a learning curve, what they needed to do. Eventually, Danny will move on with an engineering job, but Danny, his dad, and Robbie were the three owners that began this nursery. Now we see here a successful operation. Grandchildren have been brought into it. Actually today, you can see that Jeffrey, next to Danny, is part owner. He bought Danny out eventually, and we have Dupont Nursery, still a family operation. Now, it says, I've tracked this down through some sources, it said Bobby started hybridizing in 1997. I said, well, when did I meet Bobby? I knew I met him way back when he was running that garden center, but I just shook his hand. But when did I actually get to know Bobby? It says that he quit the floral business in 1995. I knew him and stayed with him while he was still in the floral business. So I had to have known him in 94 or 93. I met him at one of the garden shows in New Orleans, the spring garden show. The club was trying to organize itself, and we were attempting to sell a few plants, and I'm not even sure now where we got them. I think Rod Hendrick was able to get us some plants. And so we had a few plants, nothing special, and down the road comes Bobby Dupont. He introduces himself. We shake hands, etc. And lo and behold, we both found we have a connection in Plaquemine. And from then on, we start working together. So Bobby started hybridizing in 97. He really, around 2000, 2001, stopped hybridizing and turned his attention just to raising the flowers. You have his most successful hybridization, I think, as far as popularity, Black Dragon, and then below is Big Papa, which is done as an homage to Bobby after his death by his family. There was some success. We had here, Sweet Pink was a national winner. I think that was the first national winner that we had in the Dupont flowers. So it was a collaborative business. I did the hybridizing, Bobby did the raising. Initially, we did all of our work downtown. We weren't at the nursery. We didn't work at the nursery because the nursery didn't want us, because they thought it was a foolish venture. Robbie initially said, this is not a good way to spend resources. He tried to talk Bobby into raising, if you can believe it, a juga. He told Bobby, take that nursery, take that greenhouse downtown, and just raise a juga. And Bobby said, I don't want to raise a juga. I want to raise hibiscus. Keep your ajuga. I don't care if it makes more money. I'm going to raise hibiscus. And so we started probably 3 or 4 years just working at that location downtown. Again, learning curve. We lost a lot of plants. We tried different ways of grafting. We tried these little grafting machines that crushed everything. A total mess. Eventually, I learned to graft, and that changes things. But initially, we had our learning curve too. And we were on the outs. There was that, we can't use the nursery. They don't want us there because it's taking up space. Here again, a picture of Black Dragon. Eventually, Bobby gets his foot into the nursery. We get a little part of one greenhouse, and so we could move his collection that he had downtown into that one greenhouse, so somebody was there to water. Someone could kind of take care of things, and of course he went there every day, morning and afternoon for years to check on the place. His greatest contribution, in a sense, was he was as stubborn as Robbie. No, maybe more stubborn. One day, coming back from the nursery, I'm riding with Bobby, and he starts on Robbie. Robbie is so stubborn. Robert, he's so stubborn. He won't listen to me. Then he starts going down the road, and he goes, Danny is so stubborn. I wanted to do this. Danny wouldn't do this. Danny wouldn't do that. Then it goes down. He hits Michael. It's Ricky. So I said, Bobby, they're all stubborn. I wonder where they get this from. He's driving the car, all of a sudden his mouth drops open. He doesn't know what to say. We drive on for about 15 seconds, and he turns to me and says, "Not from my side of the family." It was exactly that side of the family that makes this a successful operation. Stubborn enough to realize there is potential here, and there is something beautiful that we have to cultivate. So the nursery becomes not only a source of plants, but a source of support for all the chapters here. Our first show in New Orleans was at Mount Carmel High School. As you notice here at the slide off to the bottom, you see a lot of other plants, not hibiscus. The reason for that is we didn't have enough hibiscus plants to sell. For the first couple of shows, we brought in other things from the nursery, bougainvillea, whatever looked nice, and put them into the show so we could make enough money to break even, or hopefully to make a few dollars. So the nursery, as it was gearing up, was also allowing us to use other materials and other support. That was because of Bobby. Here, Bobby and Bootsy were always together at the shows, filling out cards, helping in every way they can, mainly in decorations. I caught this picture of Bobby at one of those Mount Carmel shows setting up his flowers. As you can say, it's considerably different than it has turned out today. He's still wearing the club shirt, which he always enjoyed. In fact, this I think probably is his club shirt. The group here, myself, we were early judges. Bobby, you can see those are all 10-inch plants. And the first show turned out to be a magnificent success, and we were successful ever after, but always with his support. Again, this is one of the Mount Carmel shows when we were there. Here we are, 2006, Bobby and myself, Bobby with some of his winners. Bobby was great in making connections. Made connections with the people coming from Houston. He made connections with just about anyone. And if you drop the topic Germany or hibiscus, he was off and running. And so he never lacked for anything. As I said, Bobby enabled us to succeed. One of those successes, I put this in because Ann Howell was the great winner in one of these shows. Can you identify the flowers?
Yes.
Red snapper, Amber Suzanne, or Anna Elizabeth. I wasn't sure which. And then the last one, Wheel of Fortune. And we haven't seen that around in a while, but that was Wheel of Fortune. So Anne and Roe is still a member. They were great supporters from fairly early on, and this enabled Anne to excel. So the chapter, the growing, the atmosphere was all made possible. And this happened at all the different shows. There was this great connectiveness that developed in our shows, great friendship. I personally ended up with baptisms and funerals and weddings all through the Hibiscus Society over the years. Yeah, we went back. You got it apparently cut just the right way. That's another one. Bobby. This is a show at Loyola in New Orleans. We were always trying to find a home. That one was at Loyola. This is at Mount Carmel. Bobby always there, always helping, directing.
That's Ursuline.
Excuse me, that's Ursuline. And then we were at doing the decorations for the head table. He was constantly trying to make them better. Every year they would change. This is our last show here in New Orleans, and I thought this was a great picture just because it showed flowers and people. It's all about flowers, but it moves to people. And the clubs here in Louisiana is about people as much as it is about flowers. And that contribution on both levels is due to the Duponts. Another thing that is a contribution was grafting. This is one of our first grafting parties. This is Longview Gardens. There I am. I was trying to figure out somewhere between 45 and 48 when that picture was taken. But one of the grafting parties for the club. One of our big problems is getting rootstock. For a while we had to bring it in. We would order it from Martindale or from someone else, and then we try to kind of get it going well enough to be able to use it. Eventually, through the connection we had at the nursery, we got them to do rootstock. And so we now have rootstock that we're producing ourselves. And sometimes the nursery is selling our rootstock. Here again at a grafting party. This is MJ and Diane Blondo, again, teaching basic grafting. If you notice, they're using the little plastic bags that a lot of times that are used. You put those over there so that, of course, they don't dry out. Well, at the nursery now, because we got our foot in the door, no, we got both feet in the door. We got their mist system, and so we just put everything under the mist, and we don't have that problem. The only problem we have at the nursery is consistent watering. When these things are small, the waterers don't seem to understand that you're not just keeping the plant alive, you're trying to keep the graft alive. And that's the problem probably in the first 5 weeks or so. The grafting parties were, again, social events. Bobby and Bootsy attended every one. So these social events helped cement relationships within the club. And that, I think you recognize the people there. We had people, of course, that always turned it into a social event, no matter what. These were the Hibiscus that always turned up with a different outfit at every one of these events. This was, again, a grafting party that we had at Huma's house. Bobby was there, of course, with Bootsy. And this is 2010. And this, we celebrated his birthday. It was this fall grafting party. And Bobby's birthday was October 1st. So it gave us an occasion to celebrate his birthday. But I thought it appropriate because the club wanted to do this for Bobby as well as combining it with club activities. The heart of the club is certainly clearly there. Now the other thing, of course, is the open houses. Eventually we decided, let's do something for the clubs. We'll let the clubs come in and shop before we open the market to ship plants out. And that's how it started. So, and I can't remember when it actually began, when we started doing this. But of course, Bobby was behind this. And when Bobby's behind it, he pushed Robbie into agreeing, and Robbie agreed. And from then on, we have an open house every February. As you can see, Bobby was always right there pointing out plants. The Gail, I'm not sure what Gail is up to. Damon Beach was very close to Bobby and would often just show up and they would tour the nursery together. But this is actually from one of the open houses. Bootsy, this is 2015. This is Bootsy, and this is Danny Fontenot. Danny was also one of these members that was always there, particularly at the cash register, and his death was a great loss to everyone here in Louisiana. Sandra Theall was also one of our favorite members. Here she is playing Loretta Lynn for the Hibiscus. Shopping, buying, people came from all over. We had people coming from Florida, from Texas. It started out, first of all, we're gonna just do this for the New Orleans Club. And then, well, you can't just do it for the New Orleans Club. We gotta do it for everybody. And then any member from any club was invited. And it became a bigger and bigger operation. I think Robbie said they made about 20,000 last year. I put this in here to show you, this is, again, Anne Howell, always there, always here, enjoying both the flowers and the outing. Anne was a lovely person, and I thought she represented sort of the spirit of, I'm not going to be down, I'm going to enjoy my flowers. And I always saw her smiling, particularly when she was around flowers. Another loss was Steve Sentis, who died of an unexpected heart attack at the age of 63. Again, Gail and Danny. What was the name of this family? The Jameses came all the way from Texas. And this is, of course, David Beach in his glory. Now, Bobby was always willing to help the clueless with selecting a plant. He enjoyed that. It didn't matter if they didn't know anything, he was always willing to talk hibiscus with them. As you can see, he was always willing to sell you one, telling you had to have it. But these open houses also meant that the clubs from Texas, Florida sometimes, and particularly Louisiana, it developed friendships across lines that would not have occurred if Bobby had not enabled that to take place. And through Bobby, of course, the nursery. We had some greedy people that couldn't fit anything more into their cars when they left and would have to make multiple trips. And of course, the clowns came out of the woodwork at these events. The nursery also fed us at these open houses. This is the old shed that we were in, early on, but they made do. For me, it enabled me to continue my hobby with hibiscus. It enabled me to graft, hybridize, and even after Bobby's death, the nursery has been very generous about encouraging that. And of course, I miss Bobby terribly when I do this. One of the great things we used to say about Bobby, when things would be messed up, when we would have names messed up, we always could blame it on Bobby, and of course that wasn't the case anymore. The other thing we missed so much is Bobby used to be our fusser. So when something wasn't right, something wasn't sprayed right, Bobby could always fuss in a way that we couldn't. And he seemed to relish it, much to Robbie's distaste at times. At one point, there was a issue with the IRS that said, wait a minute, he's part owner, but he comes and he works at the nursery every day, in the morning and in the afternoon. This is not kosher. You can't do this and not pay him. So they gave him a nominal salary of $500. And Bobby told me this. And one day he was fussing about something at the nursery, and I told him, I said, Bobby, I could double your salary. He looked at me and he said, how? I said, promise not to go. And of course he laughed, but he said, oh, Father, you're terrible. This is, again, after Bobby's death, 2018. This is still in the old warehouse, the one that will eventually burn down. Bootsy then, after Bobby's death, took that role by herself of being the center, being the mother of the clubs. And when she was around, everyone wanted pictures. Bootsy remained very important to us until her death. So we miss all of those very much. Bobby's legacy, of course, the homage with Big Papa, that was selected by Jeffrey Dupont, his grandson, as a flower Bobby would like. Bobby married a redhead, and any red flower was beautiful to him. It didn't matter if it was almost identical to another. I would say, Bobby, we can't raise, we already have one just like that. It's almost, oh no, it's different. Oh no, we have to raise it. So if it was red, Bobby was in. And so we thought it would be appropriate to have a red flower named for him. That red flower, of course, was the 2024 Hibiscus of the Year. Another thing that this enabled us at the nursery, it enabled me primarily to share things, to share wood. Here, Barbara Poche is coming and asked me for certain things for Don Flores, who's not at that time able to move and travel. So I said, of course. So we went and cut whatever Don wanted, and we sent those with and for Don. It also enabled other people who were hybridizers to flourish. This is Buddy Paul, named after Buddy Paul Short, who has graced us today with his presence. This is the first time that flower bloomed at the nursery. This was one that Buddy hybridized. It's a beautiful flower. Buddy was quite jealous with the wood at the time, and I think he gave me one little piece about 3 inches. And I grafted it. And that's the grafted plant. Subsequently, Buddy lost his mother plant, and he lost the plant that he gave to someone else. And so when this bloomed, I said, Gail, put it next to your head so they can see how big it is. And then we'll send this to Buddy. And when, of course, Buddy was thrilled that it bloomed. When Buddy was at the nursery a couple of days ago, he came on Tuesday, I think, to the nursery. We were walking around showing things, and I told him sometime back I would like to have a Buddy Paul, to donate Buddy Paul from the nursery for the auction. And he was agreeable to it. And as we walked around, we came across the Buddy Paul that was donated, that is going to be auctioned. And this is the plant. Now, if you notice, there is a little flower bud on this particular plant on one end, and it bloomed the next day, and this is the flower, fresh flower, bloomed the next day. It's 8 or 9 inches. It was a stunning flower, really unusual, really a remarkable flower in many respects. The bush, as you saw, is healthy. I didn't cut on it. I cut on another one to make some more. Buddy has promised that if any woman bids and wins this flower, he will give her a kiss. If any male wins the flower, it's negotiable. This again a picture of the flower. This is another plant we found there, and Buddy brings occasionally some of his plants to the nursery to multiply. This one we saw on the ground, a big tall plant, and I said, Buddy, it has your name on it. Well, I don't know why it has my name on it. And it apparently was one of those plants Buddy brought to the nursery for them to look at if they wanted to multiply. He likes the name Sarah Sparkles. It is a lovely flower, and I'm hoping that the nursery will multiply it. But the nursery now is not only producing its own flowers, but other flowers for other people so that the collections can grow. Now, another thing that has happened since 2020 with COVID, for 2 years, the New Orleans chapter couldn't have a show. It was closed down. The school system wouldn't let us have the building in New Orleans. And so the nursery started letting us sell plants on the side. And then as we got started, one of our real goals was to multiply flowers for everyone that would want to buy in the chapter or in Louisiana that were not available. Not Dupont flowers that you could get, but things that we couldn't get. And so when possible, with rootstock, I was able to multiply. These are all grafted plants on the side here. And that operation is run by Gail and Robert Price and Sandra Barr. They do most of this lead work because I'm simply not here. And when I do come, then I'll craft 10, 15, 20 trays of different things that we'd like to sell. It's a wonderful playground. Gail, of course, and Sandra both use it as a playground. Here they go, their favorite place is the compost pile, where they look for things that are being thrown away, which they dig out and take home. They always feel like they're making a deal. So the nursery has become a playground. But in anything, there's something negative going to happen at one point. This was from that last snow that we had over here. But that, of course, turned out not to be that difficult for the nursery. What was difficult, of course, was the Great Fire. That burned that warehouse where you saw us having the meal, and that was where they used to load the plants. It went up in October of 2020, and with that, it was a major devastation.
What caused?
It was an electrical fire. Dust had gotten into one of the sockets, and an electrical spark had set it off, and it spread as electrical fires will, causing tremendous devastation. Now, like every tragedy, it gives you an opportunity, and eventually they will rebuild, and with that rebuilding, they will build themselves a new warehouse. And the new warehouse gave them far greater capacity. I asked Robbie, what's the future of the nursery? He says, well, to grow the nursery with an emphasis on hibiscus. Well, so we moved from barely getting our foot in the door to now hibiscus and new introductions. They'd like to introduce new plants that are not available at other nurseries. So it turned into a major operation. Again, this is now in the new warehouse after one of the open houses, feeding the attendants. And again, Jeffrey now is cooking and doing this. So again, tragedy, growth, fellowship, all of this has been enabled by a man who was stubborn enough to love hibiscus, love his family, see an opportunity, and make it grow. This is a booth that they set up each year in Mobile. Notice the banner, Cajun hibiscus. It's what they're really known for. I think one of the successes that happened here, we were reaching a tipping point with hibiscus. It was suggested that the hibiscus take too much time, too much space, too much workers' effort, that if they just turned it all into bedding plants, they'd make more money. And they were considering that. Robbie always considers the money. Of course, Bobby was totally against it. But what they discovered is when hibiscus became popular, they picked up a lot of new customers, and many of their old customers began ordering hibiscus from them. But they picked up a lot of new customers that they didn't have before. So much so that when these people call and they say, well, I want so many hibiscus, I want this just, he said, wait a minute, we're not selling just hibiscus, we're full-time nursery, we have to take care of our customers. If you want to buy other things, then we'll sell you hibiscus. So his market grew. Then we hit a couple of patches where they sold down to where they couldn't sell anymore for 2-3 weeks till plants were ready. And then all of a sudden, some of these people that had been buying said, when they called and asked for hibiscus and X, Y, and Z, and you told them, oh, well, we have no hibiscus right now available, they said, well, cancel the order. That went off in Robbie's head. Wait a minute, hibiscus is not only generating income for the plants, but it's generating customers who come to me just for that. So hibiscus now is a cornerstone, really, of the operation. They've even this past year, 2023, they started selling by mail. They made a couple of loose starts at it, but now they're seriously selling hibiscus by mail. You can order a plant and they'll sell it to you. Of course, you've got shipping, you've got handling, you've got plants. Well, a plant that would sell for $20 at the nursery is double that if you do the retail and the shipping. Again, one of the shipping boxes we loaded up this week. It's the first time I had seen the box. And that's my presentation. I think that's got it covered. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Father. Very interesting and informative. Danny, did you learn anything? Oh, you want to?
That might be dangerous.
I went with Maddie to one of the early shows, and they were so many people came. And I went back to the nursery and told her, "I'll be getting ready. This was going to be a big business." And he told me, "No, it's just a hobby."
That has become a big business.
Yeah.